Our last video gave you a nice, neat list of facts explaining why scientists are so sure that climate change is real and that humans are the main cause. We've filled libraries with reports and graphs and books about climate change, more facts than you can shake a hockey stick at. Yet still, 4 out of 10 Americans aren't convinced. And consider this, among the majority who do accept the science of climate change, folks don't seem to be doing much about it. Today we're going to look at a few of the reasons why facts don't always work, how our brain fights with itself to keep us from responding to threats, and the science of why some people don't believe in climate science. Kurt Vonnegut once said, "I was taught that the human brain was the crowning glory of evolution so far, but I think it's a very poor scheme for survival." The problem is, we're human. Psychologist John Tooby says our modern skulls house a Stone Age mind. We've come a long way since our cave-dwelling days, but what Tooby means is we're dealing with the threats of today using tools from our brain's evolutionary past. The issues that really grab our attention involve pain. According to psychologist Daniel Gilbert, we respond more strongly to threats that are personal, that represent abrupt changes in our environment, that are immoral or indecent, and that are affecting us now. Climate change is a gradual, impersonal thing that always seems to live in the future. But if climate change threatened these puppies, wouldn't you pay more attention? Our one brain is really two, one rational and one emotional. The rider looks like they're in control, but the elephant really has the last say. Lots of the time, our emotional brain elephant isn't even listening. Let's say the writer loved that article about how climate change is threatening banana crops, but the elephant isn't motivated to act until the bananas are gone. According to psychologist Daniel Kahneman, when we're faced with uncertain threats about things we might lose in the distant future, our brains will invent all kinds of excuses not to act on them today. I mean, look at the way we talk about climate change. It always seems to happen in the future tense.
Caretakers of the future, what the future holds, sheltering future generations, stand up for our future.
A poll by Yale University shows 65% of people think climate change will harm future generations, and just 38% say it will harm them personally. This is what Kahneman calls our optimism bias, assuming that we face lower risks than others do. Car accidents won't happen to us, or the next big hurricane surely won't hit here, because bad things only happen to other people. I can point to extreme storms like Hurricane Sandy or Typhoon Haiyan as obvious effects of climate change, but someone else might point to them as proof that the climate is random. We have a tendency to cherry-pick evidence that supports our existing beliefs. It doesn't help that many climate change threats are becoming so familiar that they're just normal.
A new United Nations report raised the threat of climate change to a whole new level.
Severe, pervasive, and irreversible.
Longer, hotter, drier droughts, and it will only get worse.
The world is ill prepared for what is to come.
Without action, there could be irreversible damage.
The fundamental systems that support human civilization are at risk.
Hurricanes and wildfires are always on the news. September 2014 was the 355th month in a row of higher than average temperatures. It's like a broken record, broken record, broken record. People also doubt climate change because they're uncertain about uncertainty. When scientists talk about uncertainties, all the known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, many people think they're not confident in their findings when the opposite is true. Less than 1 in 4 Americans think that there's a scientific consensus about climate change, yet 97% of scientists are in agreement.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
What's weird is we don't apply this uncertainty about uncertainty to other issues. A 1% chance of a terrorist attack, and we're sounding all the alarms.
Instead of drifting along toward tragedy, we will set a course toward safety.
But nearly certain global disruption from climate change.
There is not agreement around the fact of exactly what is causing this.
The climate is always changing between pauses, and that we are not capable with our limited knowledge of predicting which way it will go next.
8 inches of snow in the East Coast. I've got an explanation. That's not climate change. It's called winter.
Thanks to today's hyperbole-infused media, we're almost numb or indifferent to anything that isn't about to literally kill us. Why aren't more people worried? Patricia Linville and Gregory Fisher argue that we have a finite pool of worry, and climate change isn't allowed in the water. We view and make sense of our world through frames, Not just so we can focus better on what's inside, but also to decide what we can ignore. For some people, your frame is built based on your political party. For others, it's carved out of your religious beliefs or your economic philosophy. Viewing the world through the same frame as your social in-group, whatever that might be, is important to remaining part of that in-group. Basically, we're all puppets controlled by the strings of social conformity. That's not a choice, it's just who we are. From the time we're kids, we read social cues from people around us, like how to talk or not burping in public. Our survival used to literally depend on being part of a social group. So if you're part of some social group that doesn't believe in climate change, you have two risks to weigh: climate change and all of its uncertainties, or the very personal risk of becoming an outsider. Sociologist Stanley Cohen writes that climate change denial isn't not knowing or refusing to know. It's about choosing not to notice or talk about it so that we don't rock the in-group boat. Climate change is almost the perfect problem. We've got to do something about it, but every one of its attributes goes against our psychology. It's like that black cloud from Lost. It has no identity, no home, no single cause, and no single solution. It's about more than science. It involves economics, morals, human rights, ideology, technology. It's really hard. In another video, we laid out the facts about why man-made climate change is real. And here we talked about the many reasons why facts don't always work. But I haven't answered the most important question. How do we get people to act? The truth is, I don't know. Action is the destination, but I'm not sure about the path we should take to get there. I mean, is anyone? I want to know what you think. When it comes to tackling climate change, to exploring solutions and adapting to the new future, what are you worried or unsure about? What are you hopeful about? What do you want us to explore? We'll definitely be coming back to this in the near future, so let me know down in the comments and we can figure out where to go together. I think the psychology behind climate science might actually be more interesting than actual climate science. If you want to read more, check out Don't Even Think About It: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change by George Marshall. Link down in the description.
Well, good morning. You know, it's one of the gaps in my training as a scientist that I'm finding myself in this sort of social situation as a science communicator where I'm dealing with this odd cadence of people insisting that something that is false is true and something that is true is false. And this is something that I don't have the rhetorical training, and I'm trying to sort of get the chops to do this. This is actually going on in my life right now at this moment. But the idea that the false is true, that, for example, NASA could be hiding something from you. Right now, we have the Dawn spacecraft. It actually went into orbit around the largest asteroid in our solar system, Ceres. This happened about 3 weeks ago. And it's amazing. I'm so excited. This is the first spacecraft. It uses an ion drive, and it's gone from one asteroid to another. Ceres is 600 miles across, and there actually may be evidence of liquid water somewhere underneath the surface of this asteroid. Now, as we were approaching Ceres, we took some beautiful images of Ceres, and there were these odd, bright areas inside some of the craters. And they were very bright, and we're wondering if they're just a lighter rock, or if we might have seen exposed ice, which is very exciting. And then all of a sudden, the images stopped coming. And the reason for that is because we're using an ion drive. The thrust is very, very small. It's the equivalent, the engine has the thrust equivalent of blowing on your hand, just like that. Very, very low thrust engine. So we don't do a burn and start looping around in orbit around the asteroid. We have to sneak up into orbit. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been on the night side of the asteroid. That's why there haven't been any more pictures. And we are all waiting for 2 weeks from now when we swing around to the day side and we get some better images. But this morning, I'm answering emails about what are you hiding? You know, what was in those craters that you're not willing to tell us about? And the explanation as to, no, it's orbital dynamics. This doesn't really seem to get people emotionally to respond to that. You know, I want the month of my life back that 2012 apocalypse was, because I was getting calls from people who were frightened. And they were afraid the world really was coming to an end. And then there would be some people that would say, okay, I bet the world isn't coming to an end, but where can I go to see this wonderful astronomical conjunction happen? And the difficult thing to tell them was that there was nothing astronomically interesting happening on that date. This thing was whole cloth made up. And it's one of the reasons I actually stopped working with the History Channel. You know, I was one of the regular hosts for the universe on the History Channel, but they would present a show that I was doing about asteroids or, possible life on Mars from a scientific perspective, and then they would have ancient aliens on right after it. Seriously, right after it. And they would be presenting these things as equivalent. And this was enough to make me stop actually working with the History Channel. You know, the strange thing was, and I think this gets at a lot of what's going on with this denialism, is somebody called me at NASA and they said, you know, oh my God, is it true the world is going to end next week? And I've been dealing with a lot of this, and I always try to be very polite, but I'd sort of had enough. And I said to them, I said, think about this. Do you think I would be here in my office answering the phone if I thought the world was ending in a week? And I said, you know, start getting worried when all of the scientists buy up expensive wine and max out their credit cards and all go to some tropical island, because then you know that something really bad is going to happen. But this idea that I am not a person, that I don't have feelings and emotions and a family and a reason to be alive, you know, that I wouldn't react emotionally if I knew the world was coming to an end. What an odd disconnect. You know, somebody wants to separate the fact of being a scientist from the fact that you are a human being. And this is something that I've seen come over and over again. You know, I was listening to the wonderful keynote address that Leonard was giving down there, and he was using the term, and he admits he didn't coin it, but I had heard it before, the weapons of mass distraction. That when there are things going on that are bad for consumerism, or people might say that they're bad for the economy, or any number of reasons, bad for the reactionary culture, for conservatism in culture, you know, people often will try to distract you with something else. And this started to make me very uncomfortable, and I actually really enjoy working with the Discovery Channel, and I've talked to the Discovery Channel producers about this, that I'm beginning to have a bit of an ethical problem doing a show about the risk the Earth stands from a gamma ray burst, or the fact that an asteroid could destroy us, when there's an even greater risk present right now. And you know, we are not talking about that on the Discovery Channel. We are not talking about the huge amount of data that makes human-driven climate change a fact. And you know, this is the sort of thing where, you know, if you ask me for an elevator speech, right? I mean, I'm in an elevator with you, I have you for 3 minutes. You know, why is it that you should believe climate change is real and that it's human-driven? Very quickly, well, you know, what are some of the things that I think are the most compelling arguments? Well, NASA has 20 satellites that deliver climate change data. It's one of the reasons why we have to really protect our Earth science budget. These things are very important. Some of them are things like Landsat, which has been actually just giving data about land use and the health of vegetation and the entire land surface of the world for the last 43 years. We have a record of what things have changed in that time. And my friends are flying research aircraft over the ice caps of the world right now. They are wonderful. They're incredible young scientists, young women especially. And you know, we are measuring from orbit. One of our satellites I'm most proud of is called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. And you know of it, do you? Yeah. So the thing with GRACE is actually 2 spacecraft that fly about 100 miles apart from each other. And there is a microwave beam between the 2 of them. And they can measure the distance between the 2 spacecraft, tiny accuracies. It's actually about a 100th the diameter of a human hair. And as these 2 spacecraft fly over the Earth, they respond to the mass underneath them. And so when one of them is flying over a mountain range that's very massive, it actually gets accelerated a bit by the gravity. It dips down a bit, and that changes the distance between these 2 spacecraft. And so the spacecraft are up above us right now. They do a complete Earth image every 2 days, and they're doing this dance. And the reason we measure mass is that there are areas on the Earth where mass is changing very quickly. And one of the things we can measure are aquifers, the amount of water deep under the ground. From 300 miles up in space, we can actually measure the amount of water in aquifers hundreds of feet below the ground. And we see those aquifers draining. You know, and this is something that, you know, all of this data is not only free to everybody in America, it's free to everybody in the world. We want people to see these data. The other thing we're measuring are the health of the ice caps. And Greenland was in reasonable equilibrium 30 or 40 years ago. You know, the ice cap got a little bigger in the winter, a little smaller in the summer. There was a cycle. For the last 15 years, the ice cap on Greenland, which is a land-based ice cap, has lost 200 billion tons a year that has not been replaced. And if anything, that trend is accelerating. Antarctica, the ice sheets, the land-based ice sheets on Antarctica were stable until just a few years ago. And now there's one, the Western Antarctic ice sheet, which is losing about 200 billion tons a year, and now there's another ice sheet that we believe is actually beyond saving. You know, these ice sheets will melt, and that water will go into the ocean. And at this point, there really isn't any way to reverse that trend. And I think that's something you can say. And, you know, people often ask me, are you allowed to say this as a NASA scientist? And the answer is absolutely yes, because these are the facts. What I'm not telling you about is policy. As a federal official, I cannot comment on what we should do, about whether we should do carbon cap and trade, about whether we should, you know, not use fossil fuels. That is not my right as a federal official. And I take that very seriously. You know, I serve the United States government and you, no matter what your political affiliation is. And I will give you the best information NASA has about what's going on with climate change. And it is not my place to argue about the politics of it. So, you know, the idea, the attack on what a scientist is, you know, are we not allowed to be human? You know, am I not allowed to go on television, which I have done, and say I'm scared? You know, it's not that, you know, I'm going to tell you what to do, but I can tell you my emotional response. And it's become very apparent to NASA scientists that just delivering more and more data about, okay, well, we've got the acidification of the oceans. I can show you that the isotopic ratio of the carbon dioxide proves it's human activity that's doing this. I can tell you it's not the sun, because we've been studying the sun very closely for 30 years. So all of these data are not helping in the debate. And so instead, we're trying to draw back into our skills as storytellers and as people and as emotional human beings trying to tell this story. And I'll wrap up with one quick sort of anecdote. If you ever wonder how much of an entertainment value people are getting out of this very important debate, I actually appeared on Fox and Friends with Steve Doocy this year. And Steve Doocy had done a huge 10-minute piece a couple days before about how NASA scientists were lying about the climate change record, about how there was a temperature point for 1934, and they'd moved it. And this showed that they were lying about the long-term climate trend in the United States. And this was immediately, it was actually rated as pants on fire lie by an independent fact checker. Because what happened in 1934 is we recalibrated a number of weather stations, and they became more consistent as to what time of day they took weather measurements. And we also calibrated for the height difference, the altitude difference, which is something you in Boulder know about here up here at almost 6,000 feet. And I had all the facts, and I went on to the Steve Doocy show at their invitation. And before the cameras rolled, Steve Doocy was talking to me about this, about the facts, about the climate change data, about what had happened with this point. And I was being, just like I was to you, very friendly and non-confrontational, and saying, your money pays my salary. I am here to help. I'm here to clarify what the situation is. And Steve Doocy, the cameras rolled, we were on air. He gave me a very softball question about air quality and then got me off. He wouldn't even let me talk. So they're not interested in telling you what the facts are. They're interested in the entertainment, in the clicks, in the selling the ads on the, on the television shows. And, you know, it's one of the things we have to decouple. What have you heard about climate change, and why are you skeptical about it? It's something we really have to delve into. Thank you.
Yeah.